Skirious Problems.
Right, Mika, what's your Skirious problem, mate?
Mate, this is like actually the first time in the history of the podcast that we actually have a Skirious problem. And you just made like this whole little plan before the podcast and what we were gonna talk about. But I've already decided we're gonna throw that like out the window and we're not gonna follow that plan. Because our Skirious problem is called Nordic Combined, and we have the best guest possible to discuss Nordic Combined today. It's Annika Malacinski, US Nordic Combiner. Quite good on World Cup, not going to the Olympics though. So I think we should talk about some topics. Welcome, Annika.
Thank you guys. I am actually so nervous because I do not know how you guys feel about Nordic Combined. It's so mixed. Like Mika will be talking shit one day, or he'll be like, yeah, Nordic Combined, like I used to do that. So I'm actually kind of scared, but we're gonna get through this. It's gonna be good.
Nah, I think Mika secretly loves Nordic Combiners. He gives a bit of shit to them, but I think he actually loves them.
I'm gonna be honest straight away. Like, you know what my hobby is? Hating on Nordic Combined, but that's just because I am a filled Nordic Combiner myself. And the thing is just, I fucking like, I love Nordic Combined. I can't help it. It's great. It's yeah, it's like lots of friends. There's lots of my friends are still competing in Nordic Combined. Then every now and then I say talk shit about the sport, but that's just who I am. No? And then it was also really fun because I actually just come from Vienna right now, where we did like this whole Olympic ceremony thing, meeting the president and stuff. And guess who I was rooming with, Jimmy?
Don't know.
Johannes Lamparter.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, especially since I remember in Oberhof, I saw him during the warm up on a World Cup, and then I said hi, and I noticed that he wasn't so stoked on saying hi back to me. And then I told Jamie like, I think there might be a scenario in which he's not so pleased by this whole ski jumping scandal gate.
Have you heard about this, Annika?
The ski jumping scandal with the Norwegians.
Oh no.
Or-
So when we had a podcast a few weeks ago, I was talking about this ski jumping rumor in German media where apparently they injected their penises with some sort of substance to make. So they had like, I don't know if it's true, but it was in German media, and so we talked about this, and then Mika had a bit of a strong take. Rant about how like ski jumpers always try to push the rules and so on, and like it's always this kind of gray zone where it's not quite cheating but like almost. And so media kind of kicked off about it, and
I heard Mika
and so since then exactly. And
I did get lots of positive feedback as well though.
What do you think? Okay, let's get going. What do you think about that then? What do you think about this? The fact that sometimes Nordic combiners on this kind of gray zone, always trying to push a bit the rules, trying to not quite cheat, but like not far off.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's just like the world of ski jumping. And Mika, you compared it to doping, and I don't think we can take it that far, but it's like, you were a Nordic Combined athlete, like every single World Cup weekend, we have to make sure like I remeasure my stomach, we check weights, because like as a body, you change all the time. So like I have an exact measurement for like how big my stomach can be. But like one day you don't eat so much or you don't drink so much water, you've lost a little bit of weight, you've gained a little bit of weight, like your body changes so much. So, and now we have new rules where we get like a limited amount of suits. So it's honestly, it's really hard, but I will say a lot of people do take it to the next level. Because a ski jumping suit, at least what I've learned being with the Norwegians, is if you have a good ski jumping suit, that can take you many meters further. And I remember the first Norwegian ski jumping suit that was like done very well on for my body. I had never flown like that in my life, and I just remember being so shocked that, like, a ski jumping suit can do so much difference in your ski jumping. So I think we've kinda gotten to this level where, like, ski jumpers, Nordic miners know that if you have the money to invest and your governing body has money to invest in better suits, then you're always, like, inching a little bit more in, like, what how far you can take it and how big of a suit you can have. So there's a lot of scandal, especially, like, we came out of the World Championships in 2025 and Norwegians, that whole thing. I think that's definitely cheating, but everybody, like, at least thinks on ways that you can, like, push your limits in this sense. And that was a bit too much, in my opinion.
Annika, would you, just out of curiosity, how you think about this, the Norwegian scandal where they were like getting this stiff kind of material inside their suits so they would stay lower easier, if I got it right? Would you
Yeah.
compare that to doping, or would you also just say no?
Yeah, it's a difficult, like, that's cheating, 100%. But compared to doping, I don't know.
I think it was what Mika was kind of trying to show. It was more that in for anti-doping, it's like this clear limit between, okay, what you take is allowed and what you take is not allowed. Whereas in ski jumping, there's like a bit there in the middle where it's okay, you are pushing the limit of what's allowed, and if you go over the limit, you just get disqualified, and that's it. Whereas in
Mm,
doping, if you go over the limit, you're out. Whereas the result is still an advantage on the race in both scenarios. So it's kind of
yeah.
like you get so much harsher penalty if you dope, even accidentally.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas if
That's really
you,
true.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
But
that was, I
definitely.
think that was more the rant about it.
just to finish off the first point where I said I was rooming with
Mm.
Johannes Lampard, and obviously we were talking about it and the whole thing, and then we were having discussions, and it was actually quite interesting because, and this is what pisses me off about media, like they all just take like one headline of in my rant where I just maybe go a bit over the limit, which I tend to do every now and then. And then they just take this one headline and take it from there. But I did mention very often that we are talking about the sport like 10 years ago, when I was still doing it. And I did mention more than once that I had no clue on what the status was now. And I was actually, yesterday evening, we was going to the sauna, me, Benji Moser, and Fettinger with Lampard. And then we were talking about all these rules. And then he explained like some of these new rules. And then something I didn't know, actually, this is actually interesting, is you can be disqualified for having a suit too big, which is obviously because, like, yeah, a bigger suit obviously gives you an advantage. But then you can also be disqualified for having a too small suit. So there's like a measurement of like 2 to 4 centimeters bigger than like your original waist measurement, for example. That's what the suit's allowed to have. But then if you're under 2 centimeter, that's like then you're disqualified as well. That's like apparently what happened to Stefan Kraft now when he got disqualified in Japan. He had apparently he did not have the man flu. He had the real flu, and he's just throwing up and having the shitters. And so he was just super skinny. Drank lots of water. Drank lots of water. Wait, but actually now this doesn't make sense because in that case he must have had a
Oh
too
my
big suit,
gosh.
right? I see. I'm just going on about stuff I have no clue about, but
Right.
I just heard some words in the sauna yesterday, and I wanted to sound smart now. Fuck it, will not sound smart. Let's talk about the IOC trying
Yeah,
to use sexism in order to pie off a whole sport. What do you think about that, Annika Malacinski?
Oh my god, I got so many thoughts about this. And, like, honestly, these past couple weeks, I mean, my brother qualified for the Olympics. You guys qualified for the Olympics. Congrats on that. But it's like I feel so much joy for, like, the people that I know, and especially my brother and my teammates. But then, like, literally having to be left behind because if the women would have had that spot at the Olympics, like, I would be going. I am the second best American right now, and that just it's like you put in so much of this work and doing like two completely different sports, because I think at the end of the day, like, people realize how hard it is to do two completely different sports. Like, you guys focus on getting as many hours in training and like building your endurance. We have to do that plus like build the fast twitch muscles for ski jumping, and like getting the mental head right for ski jumping and knowing the technique and like balancing that those two completely different sports. It's like it's so badass. And so I just like, it sucks how like down the drain I feel like Nordic Combined has gone, where people like don't look at it as such high as it was when it was, in the first Olympics. And Nordic Combined used to be huge, huge, and Austrian still kind of is, but it's just like every year getting a little bit less engagement. And I think that's the biggest reason the IOC didn't want to put the women in.
Yes, I do partially agree, but I also do disagree partially, because I feel if you look in mid-Europe, actually the stage of women's Nordic combined has grown significantly. I know that at least in Austria, it's being broadcasted regularly on the main on a national TV sender. It's like ORF 1. And then I think even in Germany, they broadcast it on like national television as well, fairly often. So there is a stage, and I think that stage is big enough to create development, because we watch it. My little sister watches it. Lots of people watch it. So I do think for development purposes, there's definitely hope for women's Nordic combined, especially if you look at the development that has happened in the last, like, even in the last 4 years, when you knew there was not going to be Nordic combined at the Olympics. So that actually even makes me more confident in believing that there's still development possible, and that women's Nordic combined is definitely not that, and not being set out for that. Now, what I worry about much more is that the IOC is using this whole gender inequality thing, and I mean, it's, at the end of the day, it's blatant sexism, in order to achieve something much bigger than just not have women's compete in Nordic combined, but they use it to actually get rid of the whole sport of Nordic combined, which it looks right now that they will manage for already maybe the 2030 Olympics. How do you feel about that? And do you worry that actually the whole sport might just be deleted off the Olympic charter forever, basically? Also, we need to add this in here as well. It's been on the Winter Olympics since the first Winter Olympics ever. So it's like one of the OG sports that was on the Olympics, and they're trying to get rid of it now, and get cyclocross, or yesterday I heard another one, snow volleyball, in there instead.
What? Snow volleyball?
No, I hope that's not true. No, Mika, you're 100% right. In my opinion, the reason that they did not put up the women for 26 is because, like, by solving their inequality issue, they will wipe out the sport. Because in no way will Nordic Combine be in 2030 without the women. Like, we are already living in an age, it's 2026. Like, even when I am making posts about this, like, people are like, what the hell? Like, is this a thing? Because how is this a thing in 2026? Especially when you said, 1924 in Genève was the first Olympics, and Nordic Combine was there. 100 years later, plus, in women, it's still like not accessible at the Olympic level for women. And another thing, to go back on your development, like, absolutely. And I have actually some statistics now to tell you. So currently, there's 220 licensed like Nordic Mind women from 22 nations, that are like in FIS basically. And in ski jumping women, there's 434, and so already, like, we've made an insane amount of progress, like you said, from watching the first competitions to now. But we had a lot of people that had to quit, like Manny Cooper from Great Britain, because her governing body was literally like, you're not an Olympic sport, so we're not going to give you money. So she had to quit the sport. And that was like the case for a lot of people, is like sponsors. I mean, even my brother's able to advocate for himself, being like, I'm want this Olympic dream and you can help me do that. Whereas like I can't even have that opportunity to like sell my story because I don't have that like possibility.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with what Annika said, and I think that's why I was going to challenge you on, Mika, is your federation, look how much they care about Olympics. My federation, they basically care only about Olympics. That's where the funding comes from. If you do well Olympics, boom, you get funding for the next 4 years. Manny Cooper was a great example. I actually met her today when I was skiing.
Yeah.
She was saying that like GB is like, oh yeah, you're not basically not an Olympic sport, so we're not going to invest in you. We don't get anything back for investing in you. So I think in that sense, not being at Olympics affects directly the athletes because the federations just don't see the point in investing in them.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that, like, this is definitely a big problem. Um, but I feel we also, or this it's wrong to say we also have to be realistic, because what you guys are saying are very realistic scenarios. But I think if you look at it closer and you look on where the sport is big and where like most of the money that's in the sport is coming from, as of now, we're talking about Germany, Austria, maybe a little bit Norway, even though I don't think there's any Norwegian sponsors actually in Nordic Combined as of now. But when we're talking about development for like the next 4 years to actually grow the sport and make it bigger, make the level higher, there is interest. And also, I mean, probably not as much interest for people that are like from Great Britain, USA, but there's also not that amount of interest for those people in the man's side, if you know what I mean. And obviously, this is, I don't even know what point I'm trying to make, because obviously, like
Yeah,
it's wrong. But I
anyways,
feel I feel that Nordic Combined should be in the Olympics, and I feel it should
Thank
not
you.
matter if you're a woman or if you're a man. I feel the sport should be in the Olympics for everybody. So it's like it doesn't matter what side I'm trying to find reasons for what decisions could be, or how positive we still could look at it if they'll leave it out of the Olympics. It's just wrong. They should not get rid of those sports for a sport like cyclocross. Come on. If you want to do cycling at the Olympics, like there's already what 3 or 4 different types of cycling at the Olympics, but there's Summer Olympic, because cycling is something you do without snow. You do not need snow to bike.
but also if you're
Yeah.
cycling in the winter, then I have no words for people like
And you know
that.
Yeah,
what
but
pisses
I
me off
know.
so much is like the Olympics is adding sports. Like now we have mountaineering and we can't even like we can't get equality in the Olympics, and they're just like, let's add this and this and this, and it's just like there is so many women on the Nordic Combined side that are just like waiting for our opportunity. But the IOC, like they have completely different agendas. And like one of the biggest reasons they were like, you know what, you don't have enough nations, enough women. But even if you're looking at like big air or any of the other niche sports, like you need to grow up in a place that has ski jumps, first off. So like ski jumping or bobsled or these other sports are so niche. Like, and nobody just does ski jumping, you know? Like you kind of have to have balls to do it. And to your discussion with Matt, which we don't have to completely go there, but it's like you have all these exotic nations like trying, like there's the woman that's skiing downhill for Philippines, or you guys have like Haiti and all these other sports, because I think like skiing is accessible in some way, but ski jumping, like you already have to have such like the balls to go do it. Um, so already in there, like we don't have a person from like uh yeah, Haiti or Philippines like coming to try ski jumping because it's a sport that takes forever to master. And I feel like we're being almost like punished for that, to have like less people doing it. So
But I don't think you're being punished for having less people doing it, because if you'll compare on a like World Cup level, on elite sports level, there's less people, or also just in general, there's less people doing bobsled, for example, than people doing ski jumping. Ski jumping is much bigger than
Yeah,
bobsled. Um,
exactly.
but so I feel the number of people competing or doing it, that's not the main reason. I think the main reason is just interest on television. And at the end of the day, like if the Olympics want to add new sports, it's no problem just adding another sport. They can do that easily. But the problem is, if they have a million different sports, they also need to broadcast those sports. So what I've been told is that the reason they want to get rid of Nordic Combined at the Olympics is so that they'll get rid of a sport they have to broadcast, and therefore can broadcast cyclocross, for example, which is super popular in Belgium, the Netherlands, for example, and maybe a bit more popular even in the US than Nordic Combined. I could see that for myself, but still, it's not a winter sport. But so my feeling is that it just has to do with money, and I feel that the IOC sees more money in cycling, even though it's in the winter, than they do in Nordic Combined, and that's the main reason they want to get rid of the sport.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it kind of is like a cover up, because they did tell us like we don't have enough nations, we haven't progressed it enough. But yeah, then you look at other sports or like your points, and it is really about like politics and money and the fact that they're not making money off of us. But I don't think it's also fair to compare our views with like downhill skiing, because like first off, you're putting our TV times in the most random ass spots. Like who's going to wake up at 2 in the morning to watch Nordic Combined? So they're like comparing these big sports to like Nordic Combined. And then when I asked Kit McConnell at that meeting, I was like, are you counting ski jumping and cross country skiing? Because you do know we do two sports. And he had no idea. He was like, oh, yeah, good point. So it's like the fate of women's Nordic Combined is in these like men's hands, and then they just don't even know what they're talking about.
But actually, now we're like blaming a lot the IOC, and I think that FIS is doing so much now to try and develop women's Nordic Combined. Like they were super happy when we suggested that we have you on, because you've become a bit this voice for Nordic Combined, women's Nordic Combined, and I feel like I wonder if they will do so much once it's clearly not Olympic sport, also for the men. But to kind of like go back in time a little bit, first of all, what the hell was FIS doing? Why was there not any Nordic Combines women until, what was it, 2021 or something? The first World Cup, 2020? And then
2020.
then second question is, once they realize that like, oh my god, the sport could disappear, we need to develop women's Nordic Combined. The first two things that I would think would be logical to do is put all the races, as many races for women as for men, and put the same prize money for women and for men. I'm so sorry for the men. If they have to take down the prize money for men, whatever, the prize money is going to go down when it's not an Olympic sport. I can guarantee you that. So, like, everybody needs to make sacrifices for this sport. And I think men should make sacrifices for this sport as well. Like, if it's not Olympic sport, the value of the sport is like divided by 10. So
Yeah. No, you definitely have a point. And I mean, I actually started ski jumping when I was 16. Like I didn't start like when you start when you're 6, 7, 8 years old. I was like led into the sport much later. And I actually started doing the sport when it started to become a rise for women sort of combined. So to be honest, like I don't know what like FIS was doing with the women. So it's interesting to like look back and think, what their agenda was, and then when it was denied for the Olympics, then then we had this huge push for women. So yeah,
but
I think it's at fault for sure.
do you know, or like, there's probably lots of reasons why there was still like ski jumping for women for a long time,
No,
even if it
mate.
was.
First time ski jumping for women was at the World Championships. Was, if I'm not wrong, in Val di Fiemme in 2013. So we're talking about what, a 5 year, 6 year, 7 year difference.
Sorry, one second.
Um,
Yes.
TV.
So it's
Yes,
not that big of a difference.
30 minutes. Oh, sorry. My God. Everyone's on my case right now. She was like, "What are you doing in the office?" Sorry, like this is the only place that has Wi-Fi. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, okay. No, but like ski jumping has been being done by women. Well, it's been Olympics since I think
But I think we have to, and
2014.
I
at least
don't
it was
want to be the
Olympics.
guy that only talks down Nordic Combined now, but we also have to be a bit realistic sometimes. A lot of Nordic combiners are ski jumpers that as 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 year olds were not quite good enough for ski jumping, at least in Austria. And that I just know for a fact because I've done the sport. Like I literally grew up in that sport. And most of my competitors were guys that just weren't good enough to be pure ski jumpers. If you were good enough, because like just for people to know how youth competitions work in Austria. So ski jumping and Nordic combined, there's like always competitions for both. And then all the Nordic combiners, we just take part in the ski jumping competition. And then after the ski jumping competition, there's a list made of the people that actually do Nordic combined, and then they can go and ski. That's a bit of how it's set up. But the main focus there is definitely ski jumping and not Nordic combined nor cross country skiing. So actually me going from Nordic combined to cross country skiing is like so random. It like nobody does that. People that all of a sudden become super good in ski jumping when they're 16 or 17, they might change from Nordic combined to ski jumping, but nobody goes from ski jumping or from Nordic combined to cross country skiing. So I think that developing women's ski jumping before Nordic combined is also just somewhat natural. Because yeah, women. Annika, let's say you'd be good enough to win a medal in ski jumping. You'd probably be a ski jumper, right?
I mean, that's a good question, but at the same time, like I've thought about like what if the IOC just takes away Nordic Mind? Like, what is my plan? Would I go to ski jumping even if I was like good enough to be able to go win medals for them? And to be honest, like I don't know because I love Nordic Combined. I love that, it's exhilarating to go ski jumping in the morning, and then you kind of have to like mentally prepare to be in a pain cave for that 5 kilometers and like being able to almost like master the two completely different sports. I think that's such a like cool skill to have. So to be honest, like I don't know, I love Nordic Combined. This is kind of the sport that I want to be in.
Yeah. Also, I don't want you to get me wrong, and I don't want listeners to get me wrong. I think, like I said many times now, I think Nordic Combined is a great sport, but I just say naturally it's young ski jumpers that maybe aren't good enough for ski jumping, but have somewhat of a talent for cross country skiing as well that actually do Nordic combined. At least that's what the situation was when I grew up in the sport.
Yeah.
So to just go back on your point, Jimmy, talking about why did they invest in women's ski jumping so much earlier? First of all, it was not so much earlier. Like I said, the first world championship for women was in 2013. So we're talking about a 7-year time gap here in a sport that's been included in the first Winter Olympics ever in 1924. And then second of all, yeah, it's like I said, I think it's just natural that they get the hard part or the difficult part to get people actually into the sport, to promote that before. And then because cross country skiing is just like you said, a lot more accessible than ski jumping.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I,
But,
I
but
think it is kind of badass too that you were a Nordic Combined and then went to skiing because it's always the other way around. Like you always go to ski jumping, or at least everybody that I know like has always specialized in ski jumping.
but do you what do you think about why has FIS not taken more of a let's be an example for gender equality and just made it gender equal straight from the start? Like cross country skiing is gender equal. We have the same races, we have the same amount of prize money, and now honestly there's as many stars in the women's side as the men's side, and I think that's kind of a strength of the sport. And
Yeah, but
and
that
it's
took
been like
time as
that.
well, mate.
It
Like
took
with
time, but we did it
and
like 20 years ago, or like over 20 years ago.
yeah, but then over 20 years ago, when cross country skiing is just a lot easier accessible than ski jumping.
Yeah.
It's like Annika says, when you're a 10-year-old girl, like when you're a 10-year-old boy and you actually let go of the bar and go down a 30-meter ski jumping hill, like you need to be somewhat of a daring person. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And then also
Yeah.
you made a point that you know, we should have more competitions and like you guys have just as many for men and women, but in Nordic Combined it's a money problem. Like you guys have to have ski tracks groomed, obviously, but we also have to have ski jumps prepared. So it's like it's so much money to host a Nordic Combined World Cup. And so less venues want to start doing that. It's a big investment to make.
But Annika, is that not just a cheap excuse? Because preparing a ski jumping hill for a competition, there's no difference if you send 60 or 120 people down. Like the preparing cost just stays the same.
Yeah, I
Um,
know. I think it's the TV slots. Like, I agree. I think we should have like more competitions and then have every single competition that the men have. But unfortunately, like for the women, I mean, we've gotten to a point where we're starting to be more equal with the men. But like in the beginning, like our first World Cup was 2020 and we had one World Cup in that whole season. So like to think where we started from to now, I mean, we've made like immense progress. It's been actually really insane. And so I really think that like the fact that you know the Olympics doesn't see that the quality of women and what we could bring. I mean, right now, like women's Nordic Combined is more popular than men's Nordic Combined. We have 8 different nations like fighting for a podium, whereas like the men have 7. So it sucks that like the IOC doesn't see the value what the women could bring.
yeah, but Jimmy, or it also just makes me think, if I read it right, then it's going to be the first ever Four Hills tournament for ski jumping women is going to be next year.
Yeah.
So that actually raises a whole different question, and I don't think any of you has an answer for that. Why do we manage in cross country skiing to just accept the fact that there's men and girls and they both race and they just both race at the same venue at the same day? One race,
Yeah.
girls race in the morning, men in the afternoon, or the other way around. And we do that every weekend in every single competition. And it doesn't matter if it's OPA Cup, World Cup, or just some random national race. And then we have the sport which is hosted by the same World Federation. And there we're just like, you know what, they women could basically do the exact same as men because they're capable, but we're not going to do that.
I mean, it's not even a decade ago that like women weren't allowed to ski fly because our like uterus was gonna fall out and our ovaries were going to explode. So like, you know, it's like
Wait,
who is saying these things?
was this a study that was being done by this scientist that was starring in the Borat movie?
Yeah, probably. Like it's like when you really think like who are these people that are like saying this stuff? That it's like women aren't able to do it because of like our bodies. It's like our
And you know
uterus is
what the
gonna
wildest
fall
thing is?
out.
Because I come from a country where ski jumping is like traditionally huge, people love it. I know exactly who these people are, and I just see
Really? I
myself.
want
I
names.
see them say it. It's like, or I don't know like the exact person, but I do know like the type of people saying this, and then
Yeah,
you're just like, yeah, that's something these people would say. Yeah, yeah, that actually,
yeah.
yeah,
I
I
can
could see them
picture it. Like
saying
I can picture what these people look like. I haven't seen them, but I just know they're
Yeah.
old and they're white.
it. Not necessarily, not
No?
necessarily. That's actually a bit sad. No, 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 not necessarily.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, but what are we gonna do, Annika? How are we gonna go? Like,
Yeah, let's find solutions.
let's find a
Mika, what the
solution.
hell? That's an
Yeah,
improvement.
guys, can you help us, please? Like, this is huge because to be honest, like I binged this podcast. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but like one of my skis, my longer skis, like I was super behind. I'm not even kidding you, like 6 hours straight. I went from skiing to the bath, then to like
Mhm.
listening to it while making dinner. And I was like, it was on repeat. And you know, sometimes you talk a little too slow, so I had to have it on like 1.5 so you know we can get through it fast. But I think this is like first off such an amazing platform to talk about this. And I was saying this today as well. I was like, I hope that I don't have like people like coming in with like death threats to me now, like hate, because I feel like I feel for some reason like getting on this podcast and talking about women's Nordic mind and like the rightful place of being in the Olympics, I feel like I'm just gonna get now tons of hate DMs, or I don't know, we'll see.
Nah,
Nah.
actually, I think that the average listener of Skirious Problems really hates the IOC for the fact that there's no women's Nordic combined.
Oh, is
Yeah, I
that
agree.
so? Well, now they will
Honestly,
at least.
the average listener of Skirious Problem is an absolute legend.
Yeah,
That is actually a
definitely
fact.
true.
So
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think you're
I
good. Everybody's gonna love you.
but
Yeah, I hope so.
now we've been saucing enough about how great this podcast is. Annika, what are we actually going like? I have no clue.
Yeah,
I just know that we can talk about it on a podcast here as well. And
yeah, yeah,
I call upon everybody that has somewhat of a goodwill for Nordic Combined, just talk about it. Like the
yeah.
least thing we can do is talk about it. But obviously talking about it is not enough either. What are we gonna how are we gonna dismantle the IOC by getting their sexist take on Nordic Combined, or using their sexist take on Nordic Combined just to pie off the whole sport? How are we going to change that?
Yeah, well, like right now, when a lot of my posts on Instagram are exploding, and we have people being like, let's boycott the men's Nordic Combined, but that's the worst thing you can do. Like,
Yes.
in
Because
my
then
opinion,
then you give the IOC like the free card, because they're like, oh look, we don't even
yeah,
have to buy the sport off
exactly.
anymore.
No.
They do it
So
themselves.
please, no boycotting. Like you said, we need to talk about Nordic Combined. And just watch it. Like talk about it, watch it. Like this Olympics, the IOC will make a decision for not only women to go to 2030, but men. So, you know, as we looked at 2022, the IOC didn't see the numbers, the viewership, the money coming in from people watching Nordic Mind. So they're like, you know what? We're not going to add women. Like, you know, it's low viewed. So right now, like what every single person can do, watch men's Nordic Combine. I have to like scream it from the rooftop. You just post about it, talk about it, watch it. Like anything Nordic Combine, just yeah. I think that's to conclude honestly what you can do.
I have an idea, and this might be a bit of a wild take, and I'm guessing that it's not gonna happen. But as you were saying, Jimmy, like also the men have to sacrifice here now, because it's not about gender equality. It's about saving the sport
Yeah.
now. It's like the whole
No,
sport's
it
being fight
is.
off.
Yeah.
What if in every Nordic combined competition, like we're going on about TV slots, TV time, everybody's just going to start 1 minute later than they actually should. So the start is nobody moves for a minute, and then they just collectively agree on the fact that instead of being 1 minute and 2 seconds behind, I'm gonna be 2 minutes and 2 seconds behind, because number one is gonna start at 1:00.
Wait, what is this going to solve? Like the
Yeah.
It's gonna
TV
bring
time?
attention. It's gonna bring attention.
Oh. Well, I know at least like for Seefeld, we had this movement, the no exceptions with the X on our polls. So at least in Seefeld, the women are going to do it again before going into the Olympics. And I'm hoping that the men do it. Like, I just wish that more men would talk about this because it's not just the women at this point. Like, it is the sport, like you said.
Yeah.
So, and also, if you guys have any ideas on how I can go to the Olympics, like supporting my brother, supporting the sport, like coming in with respect, but also like what do I do to raise attention? Like, do I have posters or
I
any
have
ideas?
a real good idea on how you can raise attention, but actually for this one time we're trying to not be this sexist niche podcast, so actually I'm
Mm,
not gonna say it.
I think our imagination is probably worse than
Yeah,
what you were gonna suggest.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I don't know. But I don't know. That's the one thing I could just think of before. It's like if the man just take a collective stand to just wait a minute at the start line, because it is powerful when there's a start beep and nobody goes. Um, and it's
Yeah,
Do you
like
think
not
people
a
would get
boycott,
disqualified?
huh?
they
Isn't that
cannot
like
They cannot
disqualification?
disqualify you for being too late at your start. How should that work?
or
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know actually. But anyway, there's definitely some like disobedience that's doable by the men, and I think there's a lot more that can be done as well. Like, yeah, I think Nordic Combined should be an example of gender equality to make it like reasonable for the IOC to accept the sport. And I
And
think that
you
means
could also, as the
sacrifices.
IOC, just go ahead and be like, okay, we live in a world now which is so different from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and we have so much equality now. And actually, like, and obviously, I'm a man, so it's probably easier talking for me about this, and I don't feel the same things you feel, obviously. But I feel like in our everyday life now, inequality, at least in Austria, Norway, especially Norway, is not really a thing anymore. And then the IOC could lead the way by saying, okay, you know what, this last thing, we're just going to close that as well. And then we're just like not sexist or no gender inequality in any sport anymore.
I mean,
Yeah.
I really like think like what were they thinking? Because right now when the Olympics are posting like, hey, like most gender equal Olympics yet, it's just like such a spit in the face. Like
How can you
you
say that
had
even? Like it's
yeah.
it's it's a Western institution. We're in 2026, and they're like, you know what? We're actually not really gender equal, but we'll just call it like we've never been this gender equal before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
it's actually insane. But anyway, Annika, we're gonna ask you the question that we ask all our guests. Since you're a listener of the podcast, you'll know what's coming. If you had one dream session to do with two people in one place, what would you do? Who would you take with you, and where would you go?
This also took like 2 hours away from my sleep, like just thinking of like what I would answer to this question. But can it be like a couple sessions like mushed in, or does it have to be one?
Solo una.
Mika's
Okay.
just.
Okay. If it's one, I say surfing in Sri Lanka
Oh,
with my best friend Daniela De Jori. She is on the Nordic Mind Italian national team. And then the second person was really hard for me to think of, but honestly, maybe Jessie Diggins. Like, she seems so cool.
uh-huh.
She's kind of like paving the way for USA and being successful in Nordic and whatnot. So I don't know if she serves, but I think we can get groovy with it. So
I was
I
just
think
gonna
that's my
say that's
answer.
also actually one of the reasons where not somebody is like either that very close to being that or definitely not able to do the session. So this could actually be something that could actually happen at some point in time.
Yeah.
Maybe if she listens to the podcast, like I'm inviting her, let's go surfing.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm actually a bit jealous. I also want to go surfing in Sri Lanka.
I went there last off season. Most insane surfing of my life. Like it's like Bali, but 20 years ago. It's like not overpopulated. There's not a lot of tourism. It's a beautiful island, and surfing there, 10 out of 10.
Okay, not bad, not bad. That's actually one of the good ones we've had, I think, so far. Good work.
True. We're an hour in, but with all the recording issues, I guess we're rather more like 45 minutes in, but 45 minutes should actually be good to talk about Nordic Mind now. But this is definitely
Yeah.
not going to be the last time we've been talking about this issue here on the pod, and we're definitely going to
Yeah.
follow the IOC in their decision taking, and we're going to try to do what we can to influence that decision. People go and watch Nordic Combined, do it, because this time it's not about watching a sport you don't really care about, but this time it's actually about saving a sport that was in the Olympics since the first ever Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
Um, so people go do that. This is your number one Nordic skiing podcast. Leave us a comment. Leave us a comment on what you think we should do or we could do to save Nordic Combined. And next time we'll hear each other, it might be from an undisclosed location somewhere in Italy.
Definitely not from the Olympic Village, though. That's definitely not, because that's not allowed. So it will not be from the Olympic Village.
No, that's not going to be from there. Annika, thanks so much for being here and speaking on Nordic Combined. And we wish you a lot of strength to watch the Olympics that you're not going to be taking part in.
Thank you, guys. I love this podcast. You guys do an amazing job, and thanks for spreading awareness.
Thanks.
Skirious Problems. Peace out. Ciao.
Skirious Problems.